The day before the wedding, the fiancé agreed to a fake marriage with his first love to help her avoid a blind date at home. They not only took wedding photos but also prepared to hold a grand wedding. I looked at the two people in the photo, calmly broke up with him, and he scolded me for being petty. "It's just a favor, nothing happened. Why are you so selfish? If it were your ex needing help, I would agree too." Later, I turned around and married his archenemy. He knelt on the ground, crying and asking me, "You two are in a fake marriage, right?" I smiled and kissed my groom, then turned my hand to reveal the marriage certificate. "Sorry, but we really did get the certificate. Today was supposed to be the day Eric and I had agreed to take our wedding photos together, but he suddenly went missing again." Under the photographer's anxious gaze, I frantically called Eric countless times, but there was no answer. In fact, this situation has been going on for nearly a month. Clearly, it is our wedding, yet I am the only one worrying and busying myself. Eric always says he is especially busy, so busy that even his shadow can't be seen. He won't even tell me what important matters are keeping him from caring about his own wedding. I have been anxiously trying to contact my friends, hoping to learn about Eric's whereabouts from them, or that he might return my call. But I saw his photo on a friend's Facebook, and I was so shocked that my heart almost stopped. In the photo, Eric was tightly embracing a woman in a pure white wedding dress, her smile sweet. Flipping further down, the photos of the two changed into various poses, some with handshakes, some with deep gazes at each other, and even moments of playful teasing captured. My heart feels like it has been tightly gripped by an invisible hand, my mind buzzing, and the image on the phone screen is blindingly bright. The woman in the photo is not unfamiliar to me. She is Sophia, Eric's childhood sweetheart. Their relationship has always been good. Sophia always turns to Eric for help first when she has something going on, and I even added her on Facebook on Eric's behalf. But I never expected that those who called each other brothers in Eric's mouth would now appear intimately in the same group wedding photo. Sophia even added an ambiguous caption, "My Mr. Eric." Just as I was lost in thought, my phone suddenly received a voice message from Eric. "Ava, something urgent has come up at my company and I can't leave. Today is the day to take wedding photos, right? You go ahead and take them, I'll come find you when I'm done, love you." At the end of the voice message, you can still hear Sophia calling out to him. I really don't understand how Eric can calmly say "I love you" while taking wedding photos with other women. A person becomes unusually calm in a state of extreme anger. Soon, I deduced from the set of photos sent by Sophia that their location was Mount Laojian. So, I drove to Mount Laojian and indeed saw Eric and Sophia not far away, dressed in formal attire, posing for the photographer. They embraced each other intimately without any reservations, as if they were the only couple in the world. Every time I took a step closer, I could see Eric's smile becoming clearer. Suddenly, Eric abruptly released his arm from around Sophia's shoulders, his eyes fixed intently in my direction, and his face instantly turned pale. "Ava, how did you come here? You weren't supposed to be taking wedding photos?" I carefully examined the gorgeous wedding dress on Sophia and couldn't help but tease, "No wonder you haven't had time to take wedding photos, it turns out you're stretched too thin." Eric clearly caught my sarcasm, his brow slightly furrowing. "Ava, Sophia and I are just in a fake marriage. Is it necessary for you to be so sarcastic?" He stepped forward, naturally taking my hand, his tone softening a bit. "This isn't because Sophia's family is urging her, but she doesn't want to go on a blind date, so she had to ask me for help. As her brother, she wanted to take wedding photos, and such a small request, of course, I couldn't refuse her. We would just take a few wedding photos and pretend to hold a wedding, and it would be over quickly." My ears could hardly believe these words. I suddenly shook off his hand. "What did you say? You still plan to have a wedding with her?" Eric was startled by my action, stumbling back 2 steps, his face instantly pale. Sophia hurriedly stepped forward, linking her arm with his, glaring at me unkindly. "Why did you push Eric?" I narrowed my eyes and coldly retorted, "What does it have to do with you?" "Enough." Eric stood in front of Sophia, his brow furrowed. Ava, Sophia is my good friend and also my family. I have always regarded her as my sister. Can you speak more politely? Besides, I was just helping out, nothing happened. Is it really necessary for you to make such a fuss? The anger in my heart is uncontrollable. We are about to get married, and today was supposed to be the day we took our wedding photos, yet you are taking wedding photos with another woman. You even planned to hold a formal wedding, and this has become a big deal for me? Eric not only showed no remorse but instead said confidently, "What's the problem with that? If your ex, your white moonlight, encountered such a special situation and needed help, I would support you too." As soon as he finished speaking, Sophia stepped forward and gave me a meaningful smile. Eric probably hasn't told you yet, but I'm not only his childhood friend, I'm also his first love. If I really wanted to get back together with him, you wouldn't stand a chance. So don't worry, if there was something between us, it would have happened long ago. Since it's a fake marriage, you don't need to care so much. I looked at Eric in disbelief, my heart aching like a knife. Eric, if this is your value system, then there's nothing left for us to continue. Eric jumped up in anger, pointing at my nose and shouting, "Are you threatening me with marriage now? Ava, why are you so petty?" I didn't say another word, I simply took off the engagement ring on my hand calmly and threw it down the cliff right in front of him. Once, when I was at the lowest point in my life, it was Eric who accompanied me through it. At that time I was studying abroad, and my grandfather had a sudden heart attack. I couldn't make it back to see him one last time. If it weren't for my pen pal Eric constantly comforting and encouraging me with warm words, I really don't know if I would have been able to pull myself out of regret and despair. After returning to the country, Eric recognized me, and we naturally became friends, eventually ending up together. In these 3 years of dating, although he often had a bad temper and repeatedly challenged my limits, I tried my best to be tolerant of him, considering there were no principled mistakes. However, I never expected that he would openly stay with his first love using the so-called brotherly lies, even holding a wedding for her and speaking ill of me. I gradually can't figure out how the current Eric could be so different from the boy who once moved me with his delicate words. "Ava, drink a little less." Sean snatched the wine glass from my hand and let out a long sigh. I really didn't expect Eric to do something like this. I had long noticed that he and that girl named Sophia were not quite right, but I didn't expect there to be this kind of relationship between them. Truly, tisk tsk. I have already broken up with Eric, so don't call out randomly in the future, I said with a frown. Sean silently swallowed a mouthful of wine but couldn't help asking, "But after the news of your marriage spread, the stock prices of both families skyrocketed. Now suddenly announcing the annulment of the engagement, how will the upper class explain it?" I shot him a cold glance. "When did you start valuing interests over principles?" "That's what I said, but..." Sean let out a heavy sigh. Suddenly, a commotion arose from the crowd not far away. I squinted and saw a tall, slender boy with a handsome appearance arguing passionately with another man. "Ava, isn't that Lucas? The one, ugh. Eric's arch-nemesis." Sean pointed over there and said. It was indeed Lucas, and his argument with that man had escalated to a boiling point, almost ready to come to blows. Lucas tightly grabbed the man's sleeve and shouted, "You took secret photos under someone else's skirt and you still have the nerve to argue? Hand over your phone. Where did this crazy person come from? Get lost." The man struggled to break free, but was firmly held by Lucas. "It's fine if you don't admit it, anyway, I've already called the police, so just wait." Upon hearing the police had been called, the man clearly panicked. "You meddlesome fool, you refused to drink the toast and instead take the punishment drink, huh?" He suddenly swung his arm and violently pushed Lucas to the ground, then immediately pulled out a butterfly knife from his bag. Sean grabbed his wrist just before the knife fell. I wanted to step forward to help, but nearly got my arm cut. Seeing this, Lucas quickly got up and kicked the knife out of his hand. I cheered loudly from the side, "Well done. Catch him, we can't let him get away." At that moment, the sound of police sirens rang out. Lucas and I pushed the man into the police station, and upon investigation, he turned out to be a habitual offender. By the time we finished the record and came out, it was already past midnight. Oh no. Lucas glanced at his phone and immediately panicked. What's wrong? I asked. It's already past midnight, and I need to hurry home to feed the cat. Ava, thank you today. I will definitely come to thank you in person another day. Lucas hurriedly said goodbye and ran to the roadside to hail a taxi. It's so late that we can't get a taxi at all, so I called out to him. There are no cars at this hour, come with us. Lucas looked at me, a hint of hesitation flashing in his eyes. I knew what he was worried about. After all, he and Eric had always been at odds, so it was only natural for him to be cautious of my attitude. Eric and I have broken up, I said calmly. Lucas's eyes widened in an instant. Big brother and sister, hurry up, are you going or not? Sean urged. Lucas hesitated for a moment but still chose to get in the car with us. The three of them sat silently in the car, not speaking a word the entire way, so quiet that even a needle dropping on the ground could be heard, the atmosphere so awkward it felt like it could squeeze out water. Lucas lowered his head, his fingers swiping back and forth on the phone screen to ease the awkwardness. Suddenly, he abruptly looked up at me, and then, as if startled by something in his phone, his eyes widened round, and his brows involuntarily knitted into a knot. When he saw the look of confusion on my face, he quickly turned his phone over to hide it and just shook his head. He said, "It's nothing, really." I sent Lucas home and returned to my own place. As soon as I turned on my phone, I saw several messages from Sean pop up. Eric, what play is this? Are you trying to annoy me on purpose? Ava, you hit the nail on the head. Compared to principles, interests are nothing. Eric has truly refreshed my worldview this time. Now I understand, the reason Lucas was acting strange in the car was like this. Eric posted his wedding photos with Sophia on Facebook, the kind that is quite blatant, and added a caption that indirectly poked at me. Why are some people's hearts so small? A good brother is in trouble, and I just step in to take a few photos, what's wrong with that? I'm not interested in delving into whether my motivation for doing this to Eric was out of spite or something else, but this incident did remind me that I need to quickly block both of them on Facebook. The next day, a rapid knocking on the door woke me up. Outside, Lucas was holding a large bag of ingredients, a smile on his face. I said I would come personally to thank you, and I kept my word, didn't I? He naturally walked into the kitchen, rolled up his sleeves, and began washing and picking vegetables. His skilled movements clearly indicated that he was someone who often did housework. I watched him bustling around in the kitchen and suddenly realized that this guy was warm-hearted and kind, not at all like what Eric had said about him. A sumptuous feast was laid out on the table. After my persuasion, Lucas finally stopped what he was doing and brought over the last bowl of soup. Come on, quickly taste my cooking. I picked up a piece of tofu and put it in my mouth. It was so tender that it hardly needed chewing. Looking up, I saw Lucas resting his chin on his hands, gazing at me with a worried expression. I thought for a moment and guessed his intention for doing so. What's wrong? Are you afraid that I won't eat properly because I'm heartbroken? Lucas nodded without any hesitation. I was smiling, wanting to tease her a bit, but his next words nearly made me spit out my tofu. Ava, how about we get married? After saying this, Lucas blushed first. Just close my eyes and say it all at once. Our family is no worse than theirs, and if we get married, we can join forces just as well, which would be good for the company too. Besides, Eric has treated you like that, why do you have to hang yourself on one tree? It's better to let go early and find someone truly suitable. Lucas's eyelids trembled slightly, and when he opened them again, his eyes were filled with determination. Ava, I'm serious, I hope you can think it over carefully. Under his eager gaze, somehow, I inexplicably nodded. He seemed afraid that I would change my mind and immediately suggested that we go get the marriage certificate. However, the considerations of adults are always multifaceted. If I think about it from another angle, getting married now does indeed give me quite an advantage, and it only benefits the company's development without any harm. So, I arranged to meet Lucas downstairs at the company and we headed straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Just as we were about to leave, Eric's annoying voice came from behind. Ava. He approached with a grim expression, you actually blocked me? In the next moment, he caught a glimpse of Lucas holding my arm out of the corner of his eye, and he was first stunned, then his anger ignited completely. Lucas, do you dare to seduce my fiancé? I quickly shielded Lucas behind me and coldly looked at the furious Eric, reminding him coldly, Eric, we have already broken up. Eric looked at me in disbelief, his eyes red. Ava, did you team up with him to make me angry, to act together and deceive me? You think too much, I plan to marry him. After I said this, Eric's expression clearly darkened, as cold as frost. You should temper your spoiled princess temper, it depends on the occasion. Last time you threatened me with breaking off the engagement, I let it go, but now you actually say you want to marry someone else? Ava, how old are you now? Can you stop playing such laughable childish games? When he spoke with excitement, his expression was mixed with a hint of mockery and disdain. For so many years, Eric has remained the same, relying on my tolerance and deep affection, arrogantly convinced that I cannot live without him. No matter how outrageous his behavior, I could only choose to silently endure. Nowadays, I have chosen another person, and in his eyes, this has undoubtedly become a way to provoke and irritate him. Who is more childish after all? Eric, how can you have the audacity to come here and mock others? Lucas stepped forward, facing Eric directly, instantly transforming back into the proud and aloof kingly demeanor he had that night in the bar, full of fighting spirit. Your values never cease to amaze me. Clearly having a fiancé, yet you still go and take wedding photos with your ex-girlfriend, and afterward, you can post those photos on social media without batting an eye, and still have the nerve to call others petty. Aren't you afraid of being the laughingstock every day? Eric snorted coldly and retorted, Lucas, what are you pretending to be a saint for? Just admit it, you know you can't compete with me, so you're resorting to underhanded tactics to steal women from me? I advise you to save your breath, Ava can't live without me, and her feelings for me can't be changed by a few words of yours. You don't deserve Ava. Lucas narrowed his eyes, his expression becoming serious. Eric, you are just taking advantage of Ava's generosity, testing her limits time and again to flaunt your superiority, without ever considering her feelings. Someone as fickle and indecisive as you is simply not worthy of love. My few words cannot easily shake the 3 years of your relationship, you are indeed right about that. But I believe that since Ava has seen your true colors and decided to break up with you, she will never go against her principles and return to your side again. Lucas is indeed Eric's archrival, effortlessly leaving him speechless with just a few words, while his anger boiled. What I didn't expect was that Lucas would be so indignant about the extremely unbalanced feelings between Eric and me. What surprised me even more was that he could understand me so deeply. We're leaving. Lucas shot Eric a disdainful glance at the end, grabbed me, and left without looking back. His hand was unusually warm, and being held like this by him made me filled with anticipation for all the unknowns we would face together in the future. Without saying a word, Lucas hurriedly dragged me to the front of the Civil Affairs Bureau. He tilted his head back, a faint smile on his face, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. Just one last confirmation, don't tell me you regret it. Without saying a word, I tightly held his hand and strode confidently inside. When it came time to take the wedding certificate photos, Lucas suddenly became uneasy. The photographer patiently guided him, groom, smile a little, make it look natural. Lucas stood beside me, his fingers intertwining nervously, his breath seeming a bit hurried. Nervous? I asked softly. He pouted like a child who had made a mistake, nodding slightly, his gaze flickering as he whispered, I'm just afraid that this is just a whim of yours, and that in the future you'll regret it and blame me for getting involved with you. His voice was as faint as a mosquito, and by the end, it was almost inaudible. I gently separated his tightly held hands, tenderly wrapping them in my palms, and firmly said to him, You are wonderful, so wonderful that I am willing to marry you. This is not just polite talk, it is my most genuine thought at this moment. The corners of Lucas's eyes flushed with a hint of red, his face a mix of joy and a touch of grievance, the corners of his mouth involuntarily lifting. With the click of the camera, his smile was forever captured on our marriage certificate. For the wedding, Lucas was meticulous about every detail, personally overseeing everything. Even though everything had already been prepared, he still couldn't relax. This just happens to align perfectly with what I excel at. No one knows the details of this wedding better than I do. Every day after work, we would discuss every aspect of the wedding in detail. Surprisingly, my aesthetic sense and Lucas's are so aligned that we often coincidentally choose the same option. During this busy time, it wasn't until I cleared my phone that I was surprised to find that Eric had sent me dozens of messages in just a few days. It was actually a multimedia message. Each message was filled with photos of him and Sophia enjoying the mountains and waters, both smiling brightly, their gestures as intimate as ever. Yet, none of this could stir even the slightest ripple in my heart. Looking back, it seems somewhat ridiculous. I blocked Eric's Facebook, and he deliberately sent these to provoke me through text messages? I casually flipped through a few pages, even though their journey was full of beautiful scenery, it was utterly dull to me. When I put away my phone, I simply added Eric's number to the blacklist as well. Before the wedding officially begins, I plan to take Lucas to visit my dear grandmother. Ever since Grandpa passed away, Grandma's health has been deteriorating, and now she almost lives in the hospital year-round. If we are to speak of what weighs most on her mind right now, it is probably nothing other than my lifelong affair. Grandma is fully aware of my engagement and wedding preparations with Eric, so it is only proper to explain this sudden change to her in advance. Little did I expect that when I entered my grandmother's hospital room with Lucas, I would unexpectedly run into Eric, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. He was leaning against the bedside, slightly turned, whispering to my grandmother, and when he saw me come in, a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. "Ava, you're here." He stood up enthusiastically, greeting me in the affectionate tone we used during our romance, as if all the ups and downs that had happened during those days had never existed. Even when catching a glimpse of Lucas behind me, Eric showed no signs of faltering, his smile merely paused for a moment before he naturally and familiarly walked towards Lucas, opening his arms wide. "Lucas, long time no see, how have you been lately?" Without waiting for Lucas to respond, Eric turned his head and excitedly introduced him to his grandmother. "Grandma, this is Lucas, my best friend from college. I mentioned that your health isn't very good, and he has been thinking about it. Look, he came to see you himself. Our Lucas is both considerate and sensible. If you know any good girls around here, remember to introduce one to him." Eric pulled Lucas along, chatting warmly with Grandma, hardly giving the two of us a chance to interject. I didn't want to argue with him in front of Grandma, but Eric seemed to not even give me the chance to properly introduce Lucas. Seeing that he had no intention of stopping, I frowned and directly grabbed his arm. "Let's talk outside." Although Eric was reluctant, he was still pulled out of the hospital room by me, not forgetting to turn back frequently to assure Grandma that he would return soon. "What are you doing?" I asked. "What am I doing?" "I want to ask you what you're doing." Outside the ward, Eric rubbed his wrist and said with a sense of grievance, "Why did you block my calls? And now you're bringing him to see Grandma. Ava, even if you want to vent your emotions, there should be an end to it, right? What are you really doing this for? Aren't you afraid that I might actually get angry?" "I'm not acting with you. Eric, I'm telling you for the last time, we have broken up, don't look for me anymore. And soon I will be having a wedding with Lucas, and it's only natural for us to come visit Grandma together, you have no say in this. Are you confused?" Eric finally dropped the disguise, no longer playing the victim, and began to question angrily. "Aren't you just doing this because of that time you took wedding photos with Sophia? Just for this little thing, you specifically brought in the person I get along with the least to take revenge on me? I'll tell you, you miscalculated. That man Lucas is quite promiscuous, not at all like me. Ava, you probably don't know yet, do you? The Sophia you hate the most had a relationship with Lucas a long time ago. He not only seduced Sophia but also toyed with her feelings, ultimately abandoning her. Such behavior is looked down upon in our circle. Don't be fooled by how Lucas is happily playing this new game with you. Once he gets bored, in less than a week, he'll toss you aside just like he did with Sophia. Eric's gaze was like a spotlight, firmly locked onto my face, as if he wanted to capture even the slightest hint of disappointment towards Lucas from my expression. So, what exactly are you trying to achieve by saying all this now? My tone is filled with indifference. Let's set the truth aside for now. Even if Lucas is as unbearable as you say, can that change the pain you once caused me? Eric, what surprises me is that even today, you still think that I broke up with you out of a momentary impulse or because I found someone new. Do you really not understand, or are you deliberately avoiding why I would give up on our relationship? I paused for a moment and continued, as for what happened back then, I cannot know everything, but based on my understanding of Lucas, he is a reasonable and measured person. So what if Sophia was once his ex? At least he knows how to keep his distance from the past and won't do anything out of line. Before you belittle others, shouldn't you first examine yourself? Eric's breath became rapid, and he suddenly grabbed my sleeve, his voice trembling as he questioned, "Why are you willing to believe him when he doesn't believe me? We've been together for 3 whole years, Ava. The way you are now really makes me feel like a stranger. You would never have treated me like this before." I slowly untangled his fingers that were tightly gripping my hand and replied in a cold tone, "That's right, we have indeed been together for 3 years, but that doesn't mean our matters should involve my grandmother and Lucas. So, please, from now on, whatever it is, come at me directly and don't use them as your targets anymore. It would be best if we never saw each other again. Remember, we have already broken up." Eric stood there in a daze, and after a few seconds, he blinked. He shook his head repeatedly, murmuring it can't be over and over. But everything had, after all, already been decided. When I returned to the ward, Lucas was chatting animatedly with Grandma, as if they had just met and were full of regret for not having met sooner. As soon as Grandma saw me come in, she immediately beckoned me to sit by the bed, holding my hand with one hand and pulling Lucas with the other, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Lucas has already told me everything. Grandma understands that you suffered a lot while being with Eric. But I didn't expect that you two could come together. It's really great, and it makes Grandma so happy." I was a bit confused and looked at Lucas. "Do you know Grandma?" I remember Grandma mentioning that during the days after Grandpa passed away, she was in a daze all the time. With my parents busy with work and unable to be by my side, while I was far abroad, my grandmother happened to meet a kind child in the park. After learning about my grandmother's situation, he patiently comforted her. He often brought some fun little things to cheer her up, helping her gradually emerge from the shadow of losing her loved ones. To my surprise, that person turned out to be Lucas. As time passed, Grandma gradually emerged from the shadow of Grandpa's passing, but Lucas had also gone abroad. Now both of them felt a deep joy. Grandma chatted with us until dusk, reluctantly letting us leave. On the way home, Lucas was unusually quiet, no longer lively and talkative as he usually was. At first, I thought he was just tired, but seeing him press his lips tightly together, I couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" Lucas hesitated for a moment and finally spoke, "Just now, did Eric say a lot of bad things about me?" I nodded in agreement. After I returned to my country, I met Eric and learned that he had a mortal enemy. However, it is said that the two were once as close as brothers, but I don't know when they started to turn against each other. At that time, Lucas was not in Haicheng, and all my impressions of him came from Eric's mouth, which naturally didn't have many good things to say. Later, Lucas returned to Haicheng. Although our families had business interactions, under Eric's influence, Lucas and I only exchanged polite nods. It was only recently that I truly intersected with Lucas. It was then that I realized he loves and hates boldly, acts with integrity, and is completely different from the treacherous little man Eric described. "It's not like that," Lucas argued anxiously. "I just knew he would definitely slander me behind my back. Do you know? I once regarded Eric as my best brother, someone I could talk to about anything, until I discovered that he approached me only out of jealousy. When I was at the campus radio station, he forced his childhood friend in and asked me to take care of her. Considering my relationship with Eric, I did take good care of his childhood friend. As a result, Eric turned the tables and spread rumors that I had stolen his girlfriend, even fabricating a story that we were already in a relationship. I would not accept such slander and immediately distanced myself from them. But the rumors turned into me being fickle and playing with emotions. It was Eric who set the trap, isolating me from the circle. I really couldn't hold on any longer, so I ultimately chose to go abroad. Lucas sighed, his voice low. Looking back now, I was really too weak at that time. Hearing Lucas finish speaking, I couldn't help but be astonished. Who could imagine that this sunny and cheerful Lucas had once gone through such hardships? I can't even imagine how he managed to get through it all alone at that time. But all of this really does seem like something Eric could do. I asked, the girl who falsely accused you before, is her name Sophia? Yes, the one who took wedding photos with him. Lucas paused slightly, wrinkling his nose. I just feel that since we are married, I should be completely open with you. But believe it or not, I believe you. Without any hesitation, I gently patted Lucas on the head. I just feel sorry for you, you have suffered. Ever since I made things clear with Eric in the hospital, he has truly disappeared from my life. Meanwhile, my wedding with Lucas is drawing closer day by day. In front of both our parents, we made everything clear early on. The two families gathered together and had a lively meal. Lucas's parents looked at me with satisfaction in their eyes, my parents were the same, and the atmosphere at the dinner table was warm and joyful. When it was time to leave, the elders were still reluctant to part. On the day of the wedding, Sean showed up before dawn, dressed handsomely as a groomsman, grinning at Lucas and saying, "Lucas, congratulations on your marriage. Let's discuss something. You give me a big red envelope, and later when I look for the bride's shoes, I'll put in more effort to bring your wife home early." I kicked him playfully and said, "Come on, whose friend are you anyway?" Just as I was speaking, there was suddenly a commotion outside the door. When I went out to take a look, it turned out to be the last person I wanted to see, Eric. After not seeing him for a while, he looked particularly exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes and unshaven stubble, yet he still forced himself to be spirited, shouting about something. The security guard blocked her tightly. "Sir, without an invitation, you cannot enter. Are you blind? This is my wedding. It was prepared for me. It took 6 months to organize." Eric was arguing with the security guard, and as soon as he saw me coming, he immediately shouted excitedly, "Ava, quickly tell them that I am the main character today. I have decided, I will no longer associate with Sophia, the person I want to marry is you. I came here today specifically to marry you." I am no longer surprised by Eric's outrageous behavior. Although it was expected, I do not want the wedding to be disrupted. I calmly looked at Eric and instructed the security, "This person is emotionally unstable, don't let him in." As soon as I said this, Eric's momentum instantly deflated by half, and he pleaded in a trembling voice, "Ava, forgive me, this time it really was my fault, I want to be good to you." I ignored him and simply gave the security a look. Lucas also heard the noise and rushed over, his tie not even properly tied. Yet even so, Eric stared intently at Lucas. Suddenly, she fell to her knees and began to cry, sobbing as she asked me, "You won't forgive me, just because of him, right? What is so good about him? How can he compare to me? Why did you marry her? You two are in a fake marriage, aren't you?" Lucas didn't care about his tears, pointing at Eric with a stern voice, "Eric, if you dare to ruin my wedding, I won't let you off the hook." Looking at Lucas's pouty expression, I found it particularly adorable and couldn't help but lean over to kiss his cheek. Then I smiled lightly at Eric and said, "Sorry, I'm serious." Eric cried with tears streaming down his face, "Why? Ava, you can't marry him, clearly, the one you love the most is me." I didn't respond to him, nor did I show him any mercy, and directly had the security escort him out. Eric's sudden visit was just a minor episode, and we didn't take it too seriously. After all, in Lucas and my hearts, the wedding itself was the most important thing. The wedding officially began. Watching Lucas walk slowly towards me with a bouquet of flowers, my eyes became a bit misty. This is the purest form of marriage in my mind: loyalty, trust, and deep love. When exchanging rings, I mouthed to him, "Thank you." Lucas understood and gave me a pampering smile. After the wedding came to a perfect conclusion, Lucas and I began our honeymoon journey, traveling to various places and enjoying our sweet time that belonged only to us. During these days away from the hustle and bustle, the relationship between Eric and Sophia rapidly heated up, even openly announcing their engagement. But this high-profile relationship did not last long, as it quickly fell apart due to Sophia's infidelity. It is said that Sophia was fickle and betrayed Eric, and unfortunately, Eric happened to witness it all with his own eyes. These topics of conversation after meals were thanks to Sean's restless chatter, which allowed me to learn about them inadvertently. When we returned from our honeymoon and got home, Lucas was busy organizing the luggage inside, so he asked me to go open the windows for some fresh air. From a distance, I noticed a curled-up figure at the front door, so I went outside to take a closer look, and it turned out to be Eric. As soon as he saw me, his little mouth pouted in grievance, tugging at my sleeve, and he said incoherently, "Ava, you finally came back. You don't know, when you're not here, they all bully me and laugh at me. Now I only have you left, will you come back to me, please?" I gently withdrew my hand, my voice carrying calmness and determination. "Eric, you need to wake up. I am already married, and I love my husband deeply." "So what? You can still get divorced after getting married. Ava, even if you don't care about the 3 years we've been together, have you forgotten who was always by your side during those toughest days abroad? Now that I need you, how can you just leave me like this?" Eric's words brought my thoughts back to that gloomy time shortly after my grandfather's passing. It was indeed his handwritten letters that helped me regain my courage for life. However, the Eric before me is a completely different person from the one in my memories. Nonsense. Lucas appeared beside me at some point, angrily scolding Eric. "Eric, no wonder you were so eager to push me out back then. It turns out it wasn't just out of jealousy, you wanted to replace me, to impersonate the one who wrote to me, right?" Lucas's words were like a thunderclap, instantly piercing through the fog in my heart and clarifying my chaotic thoughts. Lucas walked up to me and continued, "Ava, do you remember I mentioned that Eric and I used to talk about everything? It was at that moment that he learned about the letter I wrote to you. But I never expected that he would have set his sights on you so soon. I can't believe he even used my name to morally blackmail you by pretending I wrote you this letter. The complex yet logical truth behind this shocks me deeply." Facing Lucas, my emotions became even more complicated. Eric argued eagerly, "No, Ava, he's talking nonsense. Listen to me." I looked at Eric, and the last trace of warmth I had for him completely vanished. "Eric, how much longer do you want to deceive me? That's it, I don't want to remember you in the future with only your lies in my mind." Eric's excuses gradually became weaker, eventually reduced to the sobs of covering his face and that intermittent "I'm sorry." After returning home, Lucas recounted in detail the beginning and end of our correspondence. It turned out that shortly after being forced to go abroad, his email was hacked. Nevertheless, Lucas still cares about me. After returning to the country, although he found out that I was already with Eric, he still chose to silently stand at a distance to protect me. As for why Lucas was reluctant to reveal his identity after the marriage, his answer was filled with tenderness and regret. "Ava, I have always felt guilty for leaving without a word back then. I also fear that mentioning the past will make you feel emotional again, bringing back those sad memories. When someone deeply cherishes you, they will carefully protect everything about you, ensuring that you do not suffer even the slightest unnecessary harm." Lucas gently asked, "Ava, now that you know everything, what are you thinking?" "I am grateful." I held Lucas's hand and gently kissed the back of her hand. "I am grateful to fate for allowing us to meet again and get to know each other anew. Fortunately, everything is still in time, cherish the present, we still have infinite possibilities."